Hi, I'm Debbie Harbeck, and I'm a certified life coach working with women in midlife and through the menopause transition. So each week, I'll be sharing the latest information, inspiration, and generate some momentum so you can move forward and feel more in control of your changing midlife body and your life. Let's go. So, welcome to the Midlife Momentum podcast. I am lucky enough to have with me today Audrey Danaher. So, Audrey is a writer and recently retired registered nurse with a background in public health nursing, health policy, research, and she's taught at the undergraduate level. Her writing, which focuses on women's experiences in later life, began when she chronicled through her blog her journey training for the New York City Marathon in 2014. Now, her recently published book, Becoming of Age, explores women's experiences in the third stage of life, that period that starts around age 60, and the many possibilities that abound for a vibrant life. And also, before we begin, I just have to say I'm extra excited to have Audrey on the podcast because she is my cousin, and I'm super proud of this book she's written. So, welcome to the podcast, Audrey.
Oh, glad to be here, Debbie. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you decided to do this, and I think this is so fun that I get to interview you and ask you about your book because I really enjoyed the book, and there's so many great ideas in there that I think are so important for women of my age, your age, over 40. I'd say this book is very applicable. So, why did you choose to write it? Just the big general question: why did you choose to write this book called Becoming of Age?
Well, it's a good question because I didn't start out with the idea of writing a book. And as you know, I wanted to chronicle my experiences training for the New York City Marathon because I thought, well, I'm not sure when I'm going to do another one. And I ended up sending emails to friends, and one of them convinced me to change it to a blog, and I did. And I enjoyed the writing so much that I decided to convert that to a blog, Becoming of Age, which centered on the experiences of women in later life. And I did that because writing for me is a way of understanding things, figuring things out. And I was really seeing that I was in a transition stage, that this was a different phase in life. And just starting to pay attention to not only my experiences of aging, but those of other women. And so I wanted to write about that in the blog. And one of the things I found over time was that there were patterns or common themes that were emerging. And I felt that it was important to consolidate some of those and put them in a book. I would certainly say that the book doesn't describe all women's experiences. It doesn't describe all experiences of this stage of life. It doesn't address the experiences of all women because there are many women who really are, well, for example, bear a disproportionate burden of disadvantage in their lives. And women aren't a homogeneous entity. We all have different experiences. But I felt it was really important to begin to name some of those experiences and to affirm them and to really celebrate this time in life because I think it's a time of enormous opportunity and possibility. And the book was a way of putting pen to paper, so to speak, to describe some of those experiences.
Yeah, I love that you put that out there, that it is a time of enormous possibility, because I think sometimes we think of things as going downhill as we get older and that the possibilities are much more limited. But I like what you talk about in the book being that this could be just a beginning. It's a new stage of life with brand new possibilities. And you talk about the idea in the first part of your book of the wild woman, which I love because you don't usually associate wild with this stage of life, but I love that idea, that the wild woman. So, what is that all about to you? What is that wild woman?
Well, that term wild really resonated with me. And it's interesting because I'm an introvert, and I always had associate being wild with a certain amount of recklessness, insensitivity to the needs of others, youthful debauchery, whatever. It was wild was the purview of the extroverted. But I came to see it differently. It really, it's a word that describes our essential self, the part that's untethered, untamed. It's really, I think, our true selves, that changeless part of us that we've forgotten about, that's always been with us. It's not our roles as sister or parent or spouse or our work roles or our volunteer life. It's that essence of who we really are. And I think early in life, we had a sense of that in our play, in our interests. And over time, we forgot. That was certainly, I think, my experience, that you get wrapped up in the the norms of the day, the social expectations. Certainly, that was the case for me growing up. There were when I look back, very narrow, constricting opportunities for women, just not in terms of the work they do, but in terms of how they live their life, even the laws at the time. So I think the gift of later life is that we can take a pause and revisit that self. It's not that we're reinventing a new person. We're really looking at letting that part of ourselves be more fully expressed, come to life. I think of her as maybe having had a long slumber, and there she is. And I think it's that part of ourselves that's really true to ourselves, lives an authentic life, lives life fully, and is really awake to possibilities, because I believe deep in my heart that aging is really a time of growth. We really see it as a time of decline, because I think we conflate some of the physical limitations and the losses that we experience, but really those possibilities abound. And they do in part because we've accumulated the wisdom, the knowledge, the experience over the years. You have a certain wisdom later in life that you don't have at age 22. It doesn't mean that you can't be wise at age 22, but you've just gathered all this life experience that you can bring to bear to what you want to do. So I think it's a time to begin to realize dreams. And it doesn't mean, of course, that we don't have responsibilities. The laundry still has to be done, meals still have to be prepared, that kind of thing. But I think there's a window to say, okay, what do I want to be at this stage of my life? I think there's a recognition it's a transition point for opportunity.
Yeah, I think so too. And I enjoy that you're bringing that, because it's so important to know that we can go beyond who we were in our early lives. We don't have to stay stuck in roles or the norms of what were the norms of the day, that we can question it all and maybe go beyond it, even and especially at this point in our lives where we can take back control and find our voice. And I know you talk about finding your voice in the book, and obviously your writing is your voice, and the way you write this beautifully, and your blogs, it's you found your voice obviously to be able to do this. But I know there's something physically that happened to you to find your voice as well. So could you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yes, I'm going to preface that by saying our society doesn't make it easy for women as they age to use their voice. A lot of women say that as they get older, they start to feel more invisible and not always able to do the things that they want to do, because ageism is alive and well. But I think sometimes we have experiences, and I encountered this at many times, where I go into a store and you get ignored, or social media and whatever doesn't always give a lot of space and time to this age stage. But I think sometimes, and there are women that it can do this all through their lives. That's for sure. But I find that sometimes, our experiences provide a wake up call. And for me, that wake up call was on a routine physical exam. And I went to the doctor and she said, "Oh, there's something in your neck. It looks like there's a lump or a nodule or something." And so I had to go for some tests. And I just remember the radiologist saying, "Oh, looks suspicious, needs to be followed up." And I'm thinking, "Oh, what's happening?" And I remember at that time, my life felt like it was in disarray, disorganized. My father had just died. My mother was experiencing Alzheimer's, and we needed to find living arrangements for her. Everything was disorganized and just at loose ends. And I remember thinking, this is not fun. Life is not fun right now. And so, it's interesting that that nodule was in my throat. That was not lost on me. I thought, why would there be a nodule in my throat? And fortunately, for me, I had the surgery and the nodule turned out to, well, multiple nodules turned out to be benign. But I thought, something's got to change. I'm not happy in this and this and this, and this isn't really fun anymore. I don't know why I was sort of focused on that word fun. And for me, it meant I wasn't doing the kinds of things that I wanted to do. I didn't feel a sense of joy. So I thought, well, if I want things to be different, I'm going to have to do something differently. And so I made a number of changes and I started with small steps. I decided to go into business for myself as a consultant. That was a huge step because, as you know, there's no guarantee, right? I decided to take a road trip on my own. I decided to do a kayaking retreat with a friend when I had never kayaked before. It just steps. But I think for me, the clincher was when I went for some follow up, and the healthcare provider said, "This is really interesting, but the blockage in your neck is gone. It's released." And I thought to me, okay, you can use your voice. And I thought, how am I going to do that? I'm not going to stand on the corner and start pontificating and shout out loud. But writing for me was and has been a way of using my voice. And for some people, it's painting. For some people, it's carpentry work, whatever. But we use our voice to communicate what's important to us, to name experiences, to affirm them. And I found for me it was incredibly fulfilling because it was in the writing of certain issues that I began to understand, gain insights. And other women were saying, "Yeah, I find that too. That's my experience." And I'm at the stage and I don't know what to do and this is happening. And it's not about living a perfect life, but it's living it in your own way and loving ourselves as we are, with all the quirks, the flaws, the detours along the way, but to use our voice because it matters. And I just decided nobody is served when we're silent.
Yeah.
Right. And this is a group, when I think of women at this stage of life, when we use our voices, we become powerful beyond measure. We can really accomplish and do and be a great deal and live with a lot of joy and satisfaction in our life. But we have to use our voice in whatever way to do that.
That speaks to me in, in many ways. Yeah, I also very much introverted, so I can totally relate to that. And doing this podcast for me is a way of literally using my voice, and I've written my blog as well. Finding my voice has been, like you said, it's liberation, it's joy, and it's so important because we do have important things to say and to share. All of us do. And I think it's so important that you find a way to express that. And I love that that you've embraced it and that you've done it at a time of your life where most people are like hanging up and just slowing down. And you decided, no, I'm speeding up. I'm going to move full force into this next stage of life and not let it hold me back, but instead I'm going to let it propel me forward. So yeah, that's so important. I love that message.
I think too, it's paying attention, right?
Hmm.
We don't have to open a school on the other side of the world. I think it's often the lens through which we look at life and how we live our day-to-day life and not keeping silent all the time. There's times when I need to, zip my lips and listen and let something go, but other times not. I mean, I had this experience where I was training for a marathon and I needed to go into the store to buy a new running watch to do my interval timing. And the first thing the clerk said to me was, well, I guess you want a larger face for the watch, right? Assuming that couldn't see well. And I said, no, I can see just fine. And, he said, oh, what do you do? And, well, I'm training, I'm doing 10 and 1. I'm not, this is serious stuff. And, it's really countering those stereotypes
Yes.
without being shrill or hitting someone over the head, unless you need to do that. But just really believing that you can do things that maybe aren't conventional, but you can take that plunge. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but you can give it a try. You're not being held back by that other voice in your head that says, no, it's too late to do this, or maybe you need to do this, and this first. I mean, you realize at this stage of life that if you're going to do something, you should probably do it soon.
Yeah, there's no waiting around. There's no like waiting for the right moment. I think it's time to, when these ideas come at this time of life, you do have to take advantage of them. It's not a time to wait. And I think that's so important. And I love the idea that you mentioned, which was invisibility. As we become older, we tend to become more invisible, or we do it to ourselves too. We shrink away, we make ourselves smaller, but we don't have to be invisible. We can put ourselves out there and be very visible and run a marathon at 60 and do things that, I know you went to New York City on your own and lived there for 3 months on your own, in your 60s, and just things that you would probably think are crazy and that you don't want to be out there doing at that age are things that you're saying to embrace. And I think that's so important.
Well, that's a really good one because that was a huge one for me. And it takes someone to say, well, what do you really want to do? And not overthinking it. And just say, oh, I'd love to live in New York City. Not putting obstacles in our way because, well, the New York City experience, I decided I had always wanted to live in another city. And I love New York. And I thought, well, why not? The difficulty with that is that there's about 50 different reasons, really solid reasons, why I should not have done that. And there was only one reason, which was that I wanted to. It was a big deal finding a place to live. What was I going to do there? And my dear husband just, I think, was initially perplexed, like, you want to do what? And I think sometimes the hard part isn't just asking for what we need, but asking for what we want, because that can inconvenience other people. We're not there to do X, Y, and Z. We're doing our own thing. And yet, that experience just gave me a sense of wonder and awe. It was a sense of wonder and awe each and every day doing exactly what I wanted to do. And it was so liberating. But it's, when you make decisions like that, it really helps if you can have the support of other people. I was am fortunate to have an extraordinary group of women friends that said, "Oh my, go for it, do this." And, I live with a man who really sees it as important that I honor these wishes to live my own life. We give each other a lot of space. We do a lot of things together, but we give each other a lot of space too. But I think that's the hard part when we start asking for what we need and what we want. Sometimes it's not convenient for other people, whether it's help with an aging parent or a raise at work or help with some task that you're doing, or, I need you to do this so that I can go out with friends and
Mhm.
I'm going to have to do supper and look after the kids. So it's not always easy, but I think of it as a muscle. The more we practice, the more we get better at it, right? There's always a give and take, but it gets down to, okay, what's really important at this point?
Yeah, and making what you want really important at this point.
Yes, and sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. You have to do some planning, some thinking about it. I think one of the things that helped me with New York, with my decision to go to New York, was I didn't fuss too much at the beginning about how I was going to do it. I just thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do, and let's see what happens. And I started initially, I didn't talk to anyone about it, but then I started telling people about it, and I said, well, I'm going to have to think about a place to live and this, that, and the other thing. And then help suddenly appeared. It was amazing. A friend of mine said, oh, there's this website for long-term rentals, and you may want to try this. And this place kept coming up. And it was a marvelous apartment in Brooklyn. And things like that. People came in to help to make it happen. It was a surprise, but it was like this serendipity. And I think that when we're on the right path, help does come, or we get the messages we're on the right path. And when we don't, when there's all these obstacles in the way, it's maybe not a time to give up, but a time to ask, okay, what's happening? Maybe this isn't the right direction right now. But that was my experience with New York. And so I knew it was the right thing to do at that time in my life.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did that. I think it was brave and audacious and and it's very inspiring for all of us to know that we can all do that. We can all take time out for ourselves. We can all create space for ourselves and we can all ask for what we want. And I know in your case, like you said, and part of your book too, you talk about relationships and that you're still with your husband after so many years, over 40 years.
Over 40 years, yes.
Over 40 years, which is amazing. And yet you still support each other. But it's not always easy, and that it's a decision you have to renew time after time, right? These are things as we get older too. Relationships change. We may need to let go of relationships or continue to invest in relationships that we really want. And I know for you, obviously, this is a relationship you continue to invest in, and that's been really good for you. But there's also a lot of letting go at this time of life as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, of course, there's always a back and forth because we don't always grow in parallel at the same pace in the same way. And it's always a choice at different stages of relationships. All relationships at one point or another run their course. It may be the person you live with, it may be a friend who you've known for a number of years, and you have different interests and different priorities. I've had to really work at this because I tend to hold on to things that I've had for a while, and it doesn't work. Clinging doesn't bring you peace. It really doesn't. But I think the operative word is choice. All relationships are different. I mean, thankfully, they have changed because marriage, for example, many years ago, I mean, the laws have changed, but marriage as an institution advantaged men, not women. So we've really had to, you know, work through that in many ways. But yes, the relationships, they may last a long time or they may last for a very short time. And they're a gift while we have that. Sometimes relationships end because someone in our life has died, they've moved away, or we're deeply estranged for someone. And that's a really hard one. It's not easy. And I try to remember that we experience loss all through our lives. We lose a valued object, a playmate moves away, we lose a job. We experience loss throughout life. It's a part of life. My sense is, though, that it happens with more frequency as we age because, our body doesn't often do the kinds of things it used to be able to do. The nature of work changes and we need to leave, the work situation we were in. People close to us leave this world. And, for me, it's a realization, and this is a hard one, that nothing's permanent. It comes and it goes. I think all we can do is really remember that we need to love very much what we have at this moment because, well, we know it won't last. And it's just a call to really love deeply the moment we're in. And that's a reminder, well, the moment we're in, is this the kind of moment I want to be in right now? And, it's interesting about loss because it's always a surprise to me. It catches me off guard, oh, why did that happen? Or, when my brother died, oh, he left us too soon. Like, why?
Mm.
But, often we don't know why. And so I think it's, we cherish what was and what is and embrace what's ahead.
And I think that's it. It's accepting loss is just part of life.
It is.
And when we don't, that's when we truly struggle, is when we think that things are permanent, that things should stay the same, and they don't, because that isn't life, right? So I think, yeah, to be able to go through loss, to get better at it as we get older is freedom. It doesn't mean we care less. It just means we can deal with it better and be able to understand that that is the nature of this life, and appreciate, like you said, every moment, be present more often with the things that are right in this moment. So such a good
I
lesson.
think it really cuts to the chase of what is important. And you realize that what's really important is the relationships that we do have in our lives, that we really don't need a lot. Now, that little bit that we need a lot. But you're able to let go of a lot of things, maybe things that don't matter. I mean, nursing was an incredibly important part of my life, really important. And it's not that I don't like it, but it doesn't matter in the same way now. You move to a different place. And yeah, you look back fondly, but you realize that, what's left is what's left and is okay. What I like to think too is that, when we go through all this, it's helpful not to do it alone. That's why I find, families are important. I'm not discounting that. Very important. But I find my women friends are, the allies, the people that walk with me on this journey. And when I fall or they fall, we pick each other up. There's no judgment. There isn't a lot to say, but you're in the company of others who say, yeah, we get it. We're with you. And that's huge,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, because I mean, we're all heroines on this journey that we that we go through. So yeah, I think, if we can find that community, keep them with you.
I think that's a really important thing to remember too, because these are the people we choose. These are the
Yeah,
people we choose to walk with.
yes. And that's the operative word, is choice. We choose how to respond to a situation. We choose the people in our life. We choose the way we want to be. And that's an active process, right? We're not
Mhm.
passive observers on this. And it means we have to take responsibility for our own life. So we always have the opportunity to choose.
So important to remember that at all times. I think for everybody in every situation that there is choice and there's always a choice to be made. And that if you aren't happy in a situation or a relationship, that there's a choice. And and you can choose your friends, and that's such a beautiful thing because you will hopefully have them for a very long time. And like you said, they're there to pick you up when you need it. So that's one of the most important choices I guess we can make as our friends.
I remember my mother said to me when I was a teenager, boyfriends are fine,
Mhm.
but girlfriends last a lot longer. So keep them.
Keep them, take care of them. So important. So I know we're getting closer to the end of our time, but I wanted to touch on a few because at the end of your book, you talk about some truths that you've learned from life up until now, and I think there's some really good ones in there. I don't know if you can share a couple. I know there's the one that I love is sugar has its place because and I know I work with a lot of women who are like, oh, I shouldn't be eating carbs and sugar, but there's always room for sugar. There's always room for joy. There's always room for the good stuff. So nothing has to be omitted from life.
Yeah, I think of that as, aging isn't this project. It's
Mm,
not a self-improvement project. That's not what life is about. Yes, it's not a call to abandon all nourishing food and whatever, but dining is a pleasure. And sometimes we know there's certain things we should do, but we just don't want to do that. I'm going to do this today and then move on. And I think that's what it is for me. We're not here to live perfectly. We're here to live fully.
so
Whatever that,
good. That's
whatever
so
that
good.
means.
I want to
Yeah,
say that again. We're not here to live perfectly. We're here to live fully. I think if there's any message we should take away from this conversation, it's that one.
yes.
So
And
good.
that in so doing, we become more beautiful as we age. We grow more into ourselves.
Yeah.
So being fully awake, I think the tragedy in life is not realizing that there are possibilities. When you're fully awake, you see there are limitless possibilities.
And limitless possibilities, even in our own mind and our own thoughts. Like you said, we can be beautiful as we age.
Yes.
I think there's messages out there that we are less beautiful as we age and we are decaying in some way, but we can just change that. We can just change that with our own mind. We can choose to see the beauty in it.
Yes, and not with a lot of overthinking. We don't need a detailed plan all the time. Some
Yeah.
of my best decisions have been made on impulse.
Yeah,
But
well, even when you said you went to New York and you didn't think too much about it, you just sort of put it out there and all of a sudden the pieces started to show up.
I know, and I will be always grateful for the person who asked, what do you want to do? Go to New York. Oh, so why don't you do that?
Mhm.
Well, yes, it was, and it's easy to dispel those notions in our mind.
It
But
is
if we just
easy.
hang on to them and trust that it'll work out.
Yeah, I love that. So I guess we'll end the conversation there, but there is a question that I ask all my guests, and that is for you, what's the best part of getting older?
The best part of getting older for me is the sense of freedom, the sense that those possibilities are there. I really believe we're the heroine in our story, and we get to write the story. And the story may change many times, but I believe dwelling in possibility is what the wild woman within each of us does. I see it as a time of growth and possibility and joy. Notwithstanding those responsibilities and obligations and challenges that come along the way, there is always a time when we can live our dreams and live fully on our own terms, however that manifests itself. I see it as actually one of the best times in life. And I have had a great life, I must say, but it's a great time of life. Great adventures ahead.
I love it. You made me look forward to this.
Well, you are clearly on the path, living your dreams. You inspire me every day.
Thank you, Audrey. So if the women in my audience want to learn more about you or your book, how can they get in touch with you, or how can they buy your book?
The best way to get a hold of me is to reach me by email at becomingofage98@gmail.com. And if you reach out to me that way, I can get a book to you, let you know about the book.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I know your message and this conversation is going to resonate with a lot of women in my audience, and I'm excited to put it out there. I'm excited to have had you on the podcast. This is kind of like a dream to have you here.
Well, it's been such a pleasure. I've just really enjoyed this. And I think of that line from Mary Oliver's poem. Tell me what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation.
Thanks, Audrey. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Midlife Momentum Podcast. If you want to learn more about working with me, come visit me at debbieharbeccoaching.com. That's Debbie, I-E, Harbeck with a C, coaching.com. See you next week.